right, welcome back, everyone. This is Plant-Based Kidney Health. As always, I'm Dr. Sean Hashmi. I'm a board-certified obesity medicine specialist and nephrologist in Southern California. And of course, my partner is Michele Crosmer, who is the brains behind this operation, and she's our renal dietitian. So, Michele, we got a lot of questions on soy, and it's interesting because every time I talk to soy, I think the questions we're going to talk about today are the same ones that people immediately bring up. So hopefully this will shed some light. So why don't we jump into it? And let me ask you, let's just kind of talk about, what is soy and soy protein, and sort of what are the sources? And there's this concept of processed, highly processed, minimally processed. Mm-hmm. If you can help us shed some light on this stuff.
Yeah. So soy is basically, and soy products are made from soybeans. Soybeans are a legume. They are a high quality protein source. We talked in our last episode about complete proteins and incomplete proteins. So soy is a complete protein. And then soybeans, obviously can be eaten as, cooked and eaten as the soybean. But they are usually processed in some form to then make food of how we consume it. So if we think of more minimally processed, meaning it's processed to the point where we can consume it, but there's not, the nutritional quality of it is not stripped away, or there's not too much added to it, then we're looking at things like tofu, tempeh, and edamame are, great soy protein sources that are minimally processed. And then our, highly processed is usually where it's either this, soy protein concentrate or soy protein isolate is then used and added to foods, usually in some of those like the vegan meats and vegan sausages and those products that have a lot of other things added. They can be very high in sodium. They can still be very high in saturated fat, which soybeans are not typically, they don't contain cholesterol. They're not high in saturated fat. So usually when it's highly processed, it has a lot of other things added to it. And they're usually using it to then mimic a meat, like a burger, like that, a burger instead of an animal burger. And, I was just looking up for someone, they were going out to a restaurant and there was a burger that was made from a soy protein concentrate, and it had 2,000 milligrams of sodium just in the burger. And it was, still just as high in the regular beef burger. But it's just, oftentimes we associate, okay, well, if it's vegetarian or vegan, then it's going to be, this healthier choice. So there's still highly processed forms. We ideally want to be choosing the soy that's minimally processed. So soybeans, edamame, tofu, or tempeh would be those sources.
Okay.
So having said that, and now that we know what soy is soy, how is soy protein something that is harmful or helpful for kidney health? And then just in general, what are some of those common myths and misconceptions that we both get asked or told all the time about soy?
Yeah, soy is really interesting, right? Because there are so many myths about it. But let's go back to talking a little bit about kidney disease. The issue with soy is most of the studies are done in animal models. And in animal models, it actually shows that it's actually really beneficial for kidney disease. So there was a study that was done with Molecular Nutrition Food Research in 2011. And this one was done in which they were basically looking at soy protein or hemp protein. And this was going in kidney disease that was created in rat models. And so what they found was that in addition to improvements in kidney disease, they also saw that the heart sizes of these rats actually normalized when they were given hemp protein or soy protein going on. And specifically in kidney, what they were seeing was that the cysts inside the kidneys, they became smaller, which was really interesting. The kidneys had less fibrosis going on. They also saw that the creatinine levels normalized in the mice models that were actually getting soy protein or hemp protein in this case. Now, that was one study. It was another study, and this was interesting because they wanted to see, well, what is really the mechanism by which soy really makes a difference? So another animal-based study, this is a study that was with Trujillo and colleagues. It was published in American Journal of Physiology back in 2005. And same exact thing. So they fed the animal models, in this case rats again, and they fed them either soy or casein. And what they found was that the folks that were getting the soy protein, they had improved kidney function. Their protein in the urine actually went down. And when they started thinking about the mechanism going on, what they really saw was that there was an increase in nitric oxide. Remember, nitric oxide vasodilates. There was an increase in nitric oxide production inside the kidney going on with increased soy intake. So their hypothesis was that likely the improvements in kidney function in the form of protein in the urine, in the form of less fibrosis going on, all of that was really attributed to the fact that they had more nitric oxide being produced in there. But bottom line between both of these studies is that in animal models, there's lots of data that shows soy protein is actually very, very beneficial. Now, in humans, there's some meta-analysis, there's some studies that have been done, and essentially what it also shows is that there is a protective effect, and it has an impact on serum creatinine, whether it slows it down or maybe even improves it a little bit. But bottom line there is even in human studies, there's some data, not as strong as an animal study, but there's some data that it is helpful. Now, the problem with soy protein is everybody thinks that it's estrogenic. So the first myth is soy estrogenic? The answer is no, it's a phytoestrogen. And what phytoestrogens are is they can act on the estrogen receptor, they can mildly stimulate it, or they can turn off the estrogen receptor. So phytoestrogen do both things. They either promote things or they block things going on. And what's interesting is phytoestrogen, they like to bind to estrogen receptors, specifically the beta receptor. And the reason that matters is that's where the binding actually is promoting prevention of cancers, because what it does is it's anti-proliferative, meaning by binding there, they're actually turning off cells from rapidly dividing. And what is cancer? Cells that are rapidly dividing. So that's why soy leans more towards benefit around anti-cancer. Now, other stuff to note about this is people are always like, well, soy is going to cause me breast cancer because I can't have estrogen. But what the research shows, and there was a meta-analysis in PLOS ONE back in 2014, what the research shows is, once again, time and time again, soy is actually linked to lower breast cancer risk. So once again, soy is linked to lower breast cancer risk. And this applies to both premenopausal as well as postmenopausal women going on. Then another common myth around soy is, well, it's going to impact my thyroid going on. And so therefore, I can't take soy protein because it's going to mess up my thyroid. And the answer to that is no. So there was a meta-analysis in 2019 in which basically they found no evidence going on that soy really had any effect on thyroid hormones. Now, there was one minor change. It raised your TSH levels slightly, but that raise did not translate into your thyroid hormones being actually impacted. So in other words, there isn't any clinical significance to that. So the bottom line, even when you talk about soy and thyroid, is it really doesn't do much. So not bad or good when it comes to thyroid. Breast cancer is probably protective. Other cancers is probably protective. Kidney disease is probably protective. So there you have it.
I love that.
All right. So
thank you.
Michele, then if soy is okay in our part, so let's then talk about somebody who maybe doesn't like the taste. So maybe there's somebody who wants to substitute soy milk for, let's say, cow's milk. So if they switch over to cow's milk, what is sort of the potential for acid load or, other stuff going on? And what if on the flip side, there's somebody like me who really likes soy protein? Is it also possible that they could become too obsessed with it and overdo it?
Yeah. So when we talk about that acid load or that potential renal acid load, or some people hear it as PRAL, P-R-A-L, we're looking at the potential for the foods that we're consuming and that's being metabolized by our body to either produce more acid or more alkali. And foods that are high in protein and phosphorus are more acid forming or acid producing, and really and so those are positive potential renal acid load. And then our negative potential renal acid loads are our fruits and our vegetables. And I was looking up so I can give actual numbers on soy. So when we think of soy in the form of potential renal acid load is, again, soy we've talked about is a good high quality protein. And so it does contain, higher amounts of protein than other plant protein sources, but per ounce, for example, like tofu is only 0.5. Positive 0.5 on that potential renal acid load. Tempeh is 2.2, and then edamame is less than 0.5. And again, that's per ounce. Typically, people are eating a few ounces at a time. But compared to beef, chicken, pork, per ounce, that's usually positive 4.5 to 5 on that potential renal acid load scale. So just in the sense of that and talking about potential renal acid load, soy is going to be more alkali compared to acid producing or acid forming. When we talk about soy milk, it is one of the most comparable plant milks to actual cow's milk. So per cup, protein is about the same. Your cow's milk per cup is around 8 grams of protein. Soy milk's around 7 grams of protein. They're actually pretty similar in potassium. Cow's milk around 350 milligrams of potassium per cup. Soy milk's around 300. But the soy milk is lower in phosphorus and then also lower in absorbable phosphorus since it is coming from a plant source, assuming there's no phosphorus additives that have been added to the soy milk. So I think in that case, if someone is just simply making that switch of I'm going from, I normally drink, half a cup or a cup of cow's milk a day and I'm switching to soy milk, then it's pretty comparable, but now you're getting soy over the animal protein or, the cow's milk. And compared to other plant milks, of course, other plant milks made from nuts or seeds are going to be a lot lower in protein. They're going to be lower in potassium and even phosphorus usually because there's a high amount of water to the actual like nut or seed. But that's kind of where the soy milk falls. And then to answer the question of can someone overdo it? I mean, again, that comes back to what we always talk about. We do want diversity of the diet. We don't want you eating, tofu 3 times a day and drinking 3 cups of soy milk a day and then snacking on edamame. That's all of that protein is coming from soy. Very likely it's too much protein if you have kidney disease and are trying to lower your overall protein intake, and you're missing out on other benefits of other plant protein sources, those legumes and nuts and seeds and whole grains. So from that sense, I would say, you want to make sure that that's not your only source of protein, but you can have, people don't need to be worried about consuming, tofu or tempeh or the edamame. It just comes down to, from a potassium standpoint for kidney health, edamame and tempeh are going to be higher in potassium. Tofu is going to be lower in potassium. But again, if you're having diversity in your diet and, your protein needs and also your portions, then I would say it's pretty hard to overdo. And we had talked briefly about just like making it taste good. I think there's this big fear around like, oh, tofu's gross. It's spongy or it had no flavor. And really if anyone has said like they don't like tofu, they just haven't had it prepared in a way where it was, the texture was made good and there was enough flavor added to it. And it's funny that we're talking about this because I was just watching Top Chef last night and they had a whole tofu episode of using different, there's silken or soft tofu, medium firm, and extra firm, and they all have different, you can use them all differently. So someone is making like, let's say a quiche or they're making a dessert, you would use a soft or a silken tofu. If you're wanting to get something that's more the texture of like a meat, like you're trying to do a chicken substitute or something, you're going to roast it or saute it in a pan, then you might want to use a firm or an extra firm. So there's a lot of ways, but typically what I say is a big part of it, especially with like a firm or an extra firm tofu, is pressing the water out is important. And then getting flavor in it, marinating it. Things like coconut aminos, which are a lower sodium option to soy sauce, and different vinegars and, spices. Those are all can make, really soak into the tofu or into the tempeh as well and can give it good flavor. You marinate it and then you can roast it in the oven. You could saute it in the pan. You can grill it. Like if I go to a barbecue, I marinate my tofu blocks and I bring it and my family throws it on the barbecue for me. So tempeh, I think people are, it's kind of a weird texture, like in the package, like it looks kind of funny and it's kind of bumpy and a little slimy. And so you're not eating it that way. I mean, just same thing. If you took chicken raw out of a package, you're not, if it's slimy and it smells kind of funny and it's, you are adding flavor to it and then you're cooking it. You have to do the same thing with tofu and tempeh in order for it to taste good. You can crumble up either one and make it like a ground meat substitute. So you crumble it in a pan and saute it, add all your flavorings. It could go into a pasta sauce. It could be a stir fry or an egg substitute. So there's lots and lots of different ways to cook it. And it's so versatile, but it's all about getting the texture right and then packing flavor into it, just like you would want with your animal protein. Its texture is important and the flavor that you add to it is important. But yeah, I think that's all, Rex, I would have on. So I'd just be open-minded. I would say to people, be open-minded to try it. Again, I've had tofu where I'm like, this is disgusting. I've had tempeh where I didn't like it. And I've also had it where it's delicious. And I've had nephews, my husband, my grandma, people who initially would like, nope, tofu's gross. Like, this tastes like chicken. So there's definitely ways to make it taste good. And if you guys have any of those, like the best tofu or tempeh recipe or way to cook it, I mean, share that in the comments, what you do, what marinades you use, how you prepare it, because it's good to share with everyone else. So my final question for you then, Dr. Hashmi, and this comes up inside and outside of kidney disease in general, but can soy be inflammatory? And then what about specifically in someone that has like autoimmune kidney disease?
Yeah, so soy is definitely not inflammatory. That's really important to understand. And there's lots and lots of data that supports this. So specifically in patients who have, for example, diabetes or have heart disease, there's really good studies that show that it's anti-inflammatory, even in certain conditions like ulcerative colitis going on, where we don't really truly understand the cause of it, but we use immune suppression drugs and so forth. But even in UC, you find that soy is potentially anti-inflammatory. And if you look at markers, so what are markers of inflammation? There will be things like IL-6 or interleukin-6 or TNF-alpha going on. What you'll find is all of those things actually get reduced. And so there's very good studies that have been done where people consuming soy in the form of whatever it is coming in, if they consume more soy instead of more animal-based proteins and so forth, they find less inflammation. So whether you have an autoimmune condition, whether you have heart disease or diabetes, soy is actually helpful.
Yeah, that's good. Clear it up, short and simple. And again, I mean, obviously, like if someone has a soy allergy or something like that, then you wouldn't want to consume it. And we've talked about on past podcasts or YouTube episodes before how there are even soy-free like tofu substitutes. So there's like pumfu made out of pumpkin seeds and there's hemp fu made out of hemp seeds. So there are options if someone does have a soy allergy or they're, again, just looking for more diversity in their diet outside of those soy proteins. But there's lots and lots of options. There's lots of ways to make it taste good and fit it into your diet. But I think that's all the questions that we have today on soy. Again, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions around soy and things. So I think, if you guys, any other things that you guys have heard or you want us to discuss, you can always drop those in the comments or send us an email as well. But, and any questions in general, but overall, it's not inflammatory. There's potential protective benefits for kidney health amongst, other health concerns. And so it's something that can definitely be used and substitute, animal proteins in the diet.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for checking us out, guys. And please, we really rely on your feedback and your support. And please share this with your friends, spread the word. And as always, if you got a question, pop it in the comments, send us an email. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next time.
All right. See you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.